and I can send you the presentation. There isn't any problem. We have been working in prison for more or less 5 years, in several prisons in Ibero-America. And this is part of our research project, Boethius or Boecio, that, as you know, was a philosopher that was in prison. But as you know, there were more philosophers that were in prison, like Gramsci or even Socrates was in prison, and other people. The panel is going to develop some presentation, and after that, I would like that you write down your question in the chat, so that I could transmit. We can answer those questions after our presentation. The idea is that all of us make a presentation of about 10 minutes. In order, we have half an hour, more or less, 20 minutes, half an hour, in order to make a discussion, a dialogue with your question about our project. Marco Antonio Lopez is the first person who started to make a workshop in Boecio in Mexico, but because a medical emergency, he couldn't be here. Anyway, he did a video, and we are going to give you the link to the video in order you can see that small video if you want to see it. Raúl Enrique is the person who is working here in Spanish prisons, in female Spanish prison, and he has worked with us for 2 years now. After that, Edson Renato Nardi is the person who is in charge of Boecio in Brazil, and he and his team has worked in Brazil, in Brazilian prison. And after that, Ángel Alonso Salas, that is professor at the UNAM, at the National Autonomous Mexican University, and he has been working with Boecio project for 4 years, more or less 3-4 years, in male and female prisons. And the idea is that we make our presentation, and after that, we are going to move to some questions, and at the end, some comment and question, some Q&A from audience. So I propose that you write down your question in the chat, or even you switch on your microphone in order to make it. First of all, I would like to make a brief presentation of our project. I will talk about what is Boecio, what is the background of Boecio, how we are working in our workshop, what are the conceptual bases. After that, I am going to talk about first outcome, because it is an ongoing project, and then some future possibilities for the future for Boecio project. What is Boecio project? Boecio project is an empirical research project based on the University of Seville, based but not just developed in the University of Seville. It started here in 2017, more or less. It was designed in 2015, but it started in 2016. And the practical session started in several prisons, mainly in Mexico and Brazil at the beginning, in 2018. It is funded by the European Union and the Cooperation for Development Office. And in general, our goal is to prove the efficacy of philosophical practice workshop by a rigorous empirical procedure that reaches more than 500 inmates. This is the national supervisor, as I said, Marco Antonio Lopez and Professor Ángel Alonso in Mexico. In Brazil, Professor Edson Renato Nardi from the Claretian University there in Sao Paulo. In Colombia, the team leaders are Victor Rojas and Laura Giraldes. In Argentina, the supervisor, the director, is Claudia Perlo, that is a senior lecturer at the CONICET. And in Spain, I am the supervisor, but here is working Raúl Enrique too. And this is for now, because we have some proposal to develop the project in other countries like Croatia, Turkey, or USA, for example. This is part of the team. Here you have the Colombia team. Here is the Argentina team. Here you have Raúl, or for example, this is Edson Renato Nardi that is working with another thing, and here you can see, for example, a Marco who is working with Cristal, that is the other person that is working, was working in Mexico. What are we are working? As I said, for the moment, we are working in Mexico, in several prisons in Mexico, in Brazil, in Colombia, here. We have permission to work in Argentina too, but we couldn't start in prison because of COVID for the moment. And at the end, we are working in Spain, now in San Island, here on the south of Spain. They are not here. That is where is working Raúl Enrique. The backgrounds, we started to work in prison in 2007. Eduardo Vergara, that is a colleague of mine, started to work in several prisons in Spain. After that, I was working, developing some workshop outside of prison, but little and little, I started to make more workshop with people at social risk, and one of those people were living in prison. They were detainees, they were inmates. It is important that we are not working in jails, we are working in prisons. And for US people, for people from USA, they understand what is the difference between jails and prison. We are working in prison, not just in jails. In 2015, we asked for a project for the John Templeton Foundation and the University of Chicago. They decided to fund the project. It was a pilot project, and the idea was to know if our workshop was, if some philosophical workshop could be useful for people outside of prison for the moment. And even we published the result of that previous project in a journal in South Korea, in the Journal of Humanities Therapy. In 2017, I knew Edson Renato Nardi. We started to think to work in Brazilian prisons. After that, I knew Angel Alonso and Marcos Lopez Cortez in Mexico City, and we started to work in Mexico. After that, in 2019, I knew Professor Rojas and Professor Giraldez in Colombia, and we started to work there. And at the end, in 2019 too, I met Claudia Perlo in Argentina in one lecture where I present here Boecio project. So little by little, we start to grow up. Indeed, some people from USA, Turkey, Israel, Uruguay, Portugal want to join to the project. So little by little. Today, we have some workshops in prison just in Spain. Why? As you know, as you can imagine, it is because of COVID. Just in Spain, we have some prison opened. So for the moment, we have some workshops in Spanish prison, but we have developed some training on the Boecio projects in order that in some months, we can start in more prison in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia. Indeed, we started some training, first of all, in Mexico, after that in Brazil. Now we have an ongoing training in Argentina, an ongoing e-training, electronic training by internet in Argentina. And in September, we are going to open a training in a university in Colombia. This project make that two other projects was born. The first one in the University of Uniminuto, and the second one in the University of UNAT. Both of them in Colombia, and they are more or less the same that Boecio project. So we are working on them, and we are working in two books. The first one is Fire of Philosophy, Philosophy for Social Disinsertion, and second one is a handbook on the project Boecio, where you can where you will can read the procedures and all the material of Boecio. And in addition, we are finishing a website on Boecio project, even though we have a fan page in Facebook about Proyecto Boecio. And indeed, we have a second project on critical thinking for volunteers and NGOs, and it's part of this idea of develop philosophical practice with another kind of people. Okay, I'm not going to talk about it. As I said, the idea is to improve philosophical abilities in a sample of between 500 and 1,000 Ibero-American inmates or detainees. What mean philosophical abilities? To develop mainly critical thinking and skills to rule over the passions, in the sense that Stoicism use. Why? Because our exercises are based on the concept of logos, critical thinking, the concept of ethos, that is rule over our passion, and the concept of physis, that is something like to put ourselves between God and animals. So it's to situate the people, the inmates in between God and animals. And this is part of the idea of philosophy for Stoicism. For Stoics, philosophy is logos, ethos, and physis. We work with philosophy, thinking that philosophical training is philosophy is like to go to a gym. So we say to the people that are working with us that they are going to be attending like a gym, but the difference is that they are not going to train their muscles, but they are going to train their philosophical abilities, so that they have to train all days between one session and the following one during 20 minutes at least. Indeed, their main dumbbells weight is a diary or a personal notebooks where participants will write a daily meditation or carry out one exercise that is the exercise of the week. And for example, this is my notebook because the facilitators work with them. And here you can see my own notebook, my own diary, where I all days make my own meditation, because I, the professor or the facilitator, are like them. So I am training with them, but I am not training to them. I am training with them, and we think that this is very important. Therefore, this is not a way to give a lecture. We are not asking for memorized contents, but to exercise the body, spirit in order. It can support people, detainees, inmates can support more and more weight and heat from life. So we have some ideas, and as I said, for example, this is very important. Professor, the field philosopher, is not someone who lecture, but a colleague of the inmates that is going to train with themselves, with the detainees. The structure of a session normally is a focus exercise. It's optional. We don't make a focus exercise always, but in some occasion we make a focus exercise. After that, we make a dialogue about how was the training of all the people during the previous week, during the week. We talk about it for 20 or 30 minutes. After that, we make a practical and groupal exercise for 25 minutes, more or less. After that, we explain a little theory on the basis of the exercise of that session, and we propose at the end an exercise of training. What exercise do we do? And I am going to finish here. In the session, what are the exercises that we propose in the 22 sessions that weekly we are going to develop in Boecio? Mainly, they are Stoic exercise. And what are the Stoic exercise? They develop exercise like exercise for ruling over our passion, so, or enkrateia. They develop exercise like diacrisis, that is an exercise to distinguish what I can change or what I have to accept. We develop exercise like prosoche, that is a way to see deeply and broadly. We work on exercise like vision from above, or even we work with exercise like premeditatio malorum, gymnastique, acroasis, several exercises that are part of the Stoicism. And at the end, we have another exercise on critical thinking, where we try to help people not to study critical thinking, but to put in practice some abilities in the session, like conceptualization, definition, making hypotheses, making good arguments, and the rest of critical thinking. This is a research project, therefore we are trying to make a measure of the results. So we are working with some instrument, for example, quantitative instrument, like the three-dimensional wisdom scale by Monica Ardell. You have here some images of it. And even and in addition, we are working with the wisdom scale developed by Jeffrey Webster, and it works on openness of mind, emotional control or emotional regulation, abilities to develop critical thinking. Several items are measured by this test by Webster. In addition, we are working with qualitative instruments. So we have some group dialogues or focus dialogue, semi-structured interviews, 2 ethical dilemmas that we measure at the beginning and at the end of all the procedure. The procedure more or less lasts for 6 or 7 months. So it's a long process for the inmates. We have some results, but I don't want to explain too much the result. If you want to know what are the results, we can talk about it at the end of the panel. And the future for the moment is to create some courses. Now we are deploying some university courses, as I said, to extend the workshops to more than 10,000 inmates or more people, to extend the workshops to non-Spanish speaking countries, to get more funds and volunteers, and to put contact our work with other initiatives inside prison, and to publish at least 2 books on philosophical practice in prison that is ongoing now. And in addition, I think that it is important to explore the concept of prison as a category to enlarge the theoretical approach to philosophy. What means a prisonal approach to philosophy? I think that it could be very interesting. So that's it, what I wanted to explain. And now I am going to give the word to my colleague. So if you want to start, for example, Raúl.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the organization for this wonderful international conference on philosophical practice. Professor Jose Barrientos for kind invitation as well. And I'm here to talk about my professional experience working with inmates as well as prostitutes in the Canary Islands, Spain. I must say that it has been a long and exciting journey before becoming part of Poesio. I've been working in human resources for over 20 years, but in the last decade, I focused my efforts in researching new models of jobs and career transitions based on philosophical practices, only working with women in several places, in the countryside, in poor areas, or modest neighborhoods, and also in different personal situations. For example, long time unemployed or women that have suffered gender violence. No? In 2019, I thought that it was the moment to go one step further, and I started working with women in prison, and women as well, with that their way of life was no other than prostitution. That was really touched my heart, as they have always had the premise that we are all human beings. That is the first demand of all the people that I've worked with, being considered as a human being at least. I must confess that it's been quite easy to work with inmates and prostitutes. They have a very intense way of life. In my opinion, that is what probably got them into the situation, prostitution or prison. And at the beginning, they come to Poesio very confused. and insecure. The word philosophy sounds strange to them, but after every single session, they leave the room with a sensation that they have been in a kind of Asian spiritual temple in the Middle East. They haven't seen probably any God, but instead of this, they really have the chance to listen their inner dialogue inside of there. They come to class, and also they've got the opportunity to share their own experience, but in a very close dialogue that takes 1 hour approximately, and where they feel they haven't been judged. It is great that after a few sessions, they think that their level of compromise with Boesio has rise. But what I really think is that compromise is in fact with them. It is with every sensation of being more alive every day. That's why every time they come to class, they consider they are going to a temple. Honestly, a sacred home of gods. Even when there has been any change of location in prison because of the direction, they feel quite angry at first, but suddenly they get into their own temple, and wherever they've been sent doesn't matter. Besides, this is my own temple too when I stay with them. For many years, I think they have been trying to escape from the pain of their lives, or just being the person who clients want to in their sexual fantasies. Not only during this time, they not only disconnect from their minds, but also from their bodies as well. And with Boesio training, they've got the opportunity to reconnect and understand their emotions and thoughts through philosophical practices. This is one of the most important parts of a human being, I think, feel and think to keep on being human. Also, in Boesio, they can manage very well with the first part of the program, when we practice emotional self-awareness and emotional self-management, because they have been really stoic for many years, an entire life, trying to understand others' family members' emotions in order to serve them. What is more, in the case of prostitutes, they are really experts about sensations and emotions, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, just for surviving as a sexual slaves. This time, now, they understand primary emotions like anger when they've just arrived in prison. The following one emotions like fear for that new place and a strange situation, and sadness as well when they finally think about the years they still have to stay in prison. Then they can manage very better with the representations that could take them into anxiety or even depression, I think. So after every session in Boesio, they start to remember and rebuild their own story. After being raised from their families, sexual clients, society, and ultimately by themselves as well. In other words, they start to rebuild themselves. For this very reason, they are now open to learn, not only from philosophy, but also they learn from the rest of the group. In fact, they start to see each other as a human being too. Listen, something, right? Okay. In fact, they start to see each other as a human being too, as a part of a different group, the philosophers, for example, as they are called in prison, they also take care of each other in many situations during the lives in prison or prostitution, which means they are actually making a philosophy team. And at that moment in class, I could say that both empowerment and dignity show up. With this kind of autonomy or emotional self-management, now it is time to think more critically in Boesio and about their lives. And I have to say that this is one of the most enjoyable moments when they see themselves as a moral agents. So from this state of consciousness of their past and present story, now with awareness and a healthy connection with their sensations and emotions and thoughts, they make themselves responsible to take another step forward. They really feel now necessary to show how unique they already are. How can one achieve that in our society? Just looking, I think, for another job in case of prostitution. This is the next step. After, I think, Boesio, this is the line that we have to research, maybe. Looking for another occupation, another job or career in case of inmates because they are in prison. In both situations, in prostitution or in prison, I found that after Boesio training, it is the right moment to start working with, for example, career management or job search, because what happened in Boesio is similar to the initial process when you go to a career management professional. For the most part, career management has a lot to do with philosophy, not only because it takes into account the economic aspects of work, but also other philosophical ones, the essence of a man, like Karl Marx said. As a consequence of this kind of rebirth, they pay attention, pay attention to time, exactly the time of the rest of their lives. And suddenly they mentally set up new projects and goals where the relative have an important place. For example, the prostitutes who I used to work with, they organize different courses and talks every week after Boesio training. Moreover, in the same place, their temple, which in this case was a rooftop of an old house where they are attended by a non-governmental organization. They are also trying to create their own association after Boesio, called azoteistas, which means the roof-toppers, based on Madame de Staël and her salons in Paris in 18th century, where the only place where women could talk about politics, philosophy, and science. And 3 centuries later, we are seeing the same with prostitutes on a rooftop in the Canary Islands. And also in prison, due to the good results, both inmates and the direction are looking forward to setting up new Boesio training next month in August. This situation is possible because there has been changes inside the prison. First of all, everybody's curiosity about what happens in the room because of the smiles, the faces, and peace of mind they leave the class with. It seems like they are now more visible, unique, respectable people. First, they are now treated from human being to human being, which means that they have also recovered their moral status. And at last, but not least, I would like to say that Boesio and its philosophical practices have changed in some way their lives, my life as well, and I think many lives inside and why not outside the prison. I cannot be more grateful for it, and I just can say thank you to Boesio, to the equipe, and the Professor Jose Barrientos. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you very much, Raúl, for your testimony and for your ideas and for developing the Boesio project inside here in Spain. Now we move to Ángel Alonso from Mexico. As I said, he's professor at the UNAM, the University National Autonomous of Mexico, and he has been working in Boesio for several years too. And with Marco Antonio Lopez, and he can't be here, but Marco is a student of Ángel Alonso, so this is very interesting because we are working not just with philosophers, but with people that are not yet philosophers, with people that are not philosophers. For example, Raúl is not philosopher, more or less. He's more and more philosopher because he's studying a lot of philosophy. But I think that the idea is to take philosophy to another people and to learn from another people like Raúl. So thank you very much for being with us, Ángel, and it's your turn.
Hi, I apologize because my English is not very well, and I hope that I could speak with us about the problems and the experience that they have in Mexico in two prisons. One of the prisons is a male prison that is in the south of Mexico City, and the other prison is about the female prison in the west of the Mexico City. Two of my students, Cristal Luna and Marco Lopez, is working in male prison with the project Boesius. I talk about the testimony of the women of prison about the problems that they have. One of these problems is that how the exercise or the critical thinking in the Boesius project about the philosophical abilities could help with her loneliness. One of the problems that the women have in the prison that said Raúl is about how to be mother, how to be daughter, how to be wife in prison, and how they use the rule over of patience with the Seneca exercise to continue with this role of the mother, of daughter, or wife. Pepe Barrientos said said that okay, wait a moment. Pepe Barrientos said that the Boesius project is divided in two groups. The group A, it's about the group that have the abilities of critical thinking and work with the ethos, physis, and logos, with abilities to read a text or philosophers, or to think about some case of some examples to put this logical exercise. And in the group B, it's a group that the women don't have lectures of philosophy, and in some case they have classes or sports, literature, or meets to talk about the problems that they have. In the group A, the women's read Marco Aurelio Meditations and the exercise of Seneca. This exercise, it's about this exercise try to get in this exercise the propose that this exercise is that the women in the prison think about their acts that they made and how they can change your form of your way of life or your actions that they live in prisons, because in prison it's very frequently that they be slaves or passions, and the Seneca exercise without from ataraxia, ascesis, or other exercise would try to get abilities to think about how they government or passions, and how to be the use and how can they use the wisdom to think about the problems, to think about of the time that they have to stay in prison, and how to work with the gender violence that they have because are women. In Mexico, big women in prison is very unfortunate. It's a kind of it's a kind it's a kind of the it's very unfortunate because for example be male in if one person were in male prisons, they have more benefits, they have more visits to their families, and in some case the time to stay in prison is less than a woman that made the same delict or the same act to have in jail. Big woman in jail or in prison, it's kind of it's a best problem because they lost your children, they lost your family, and they don't have don't have the same number of visits, because it's very worse to be women in prison. The prostitution, the problems that drugs, and the loneliness it's more no, they have more numbers in women's prisons than the males prisons. In the group B, in male prisons, they don't interest it because they want to use your time with exercise or another abilities that not that to read literature, myths, or stories, because they think that this is not very important. But in the group B that work with the women's females, excuse me, they like to talk about the myths. They like to talk about the stories. They like to talk about the literature because they think that in the exercise to write and to read to the other students, it's very read literature or read myths or read stories about that the questions that the woman's life help the women to don't think that they are loneliness. I apologize because my English is very bad, and I think that this is my contribution.
Thank you very much, Angel. As you said, that I think that it is important to know the role of women in prison in Mexico, because unfortunately, as you said, to be men or to be man and to be woman in Mexico is very different. And you were talking about that we are working in Boecio in two groups, a control group and an experimental group. And as you said, in the normally you are working on sports, on literature, but it is not the philosophical, the empirical group. As you said, let me resume to make a summary of you said. In the experimental group, we are working with Stoicism, with Stoic exercises in general. And why? As you said, because Stoicism is a way of living, is a way to change our life. And as you said, one of the problem of women in Mexico is that, as you said, they are a slave of their passions. And unfortunately, I have seen how a lot of women commit some crimes because they felt in love with their boyfriends, and the boyfriends said to them that they have to kidnap to some people, and at the end, the person who finished in prison is not the boyfriend, it's the female. So as you said, it is important that they rule over their passion, that they govern over their passion. And this is the idea, as you said, in the experimental group inside the project. In addition, it is important to know that in prison in Mexico, in a lot of occasions, for the same crime, a man is going to be less year in prison than a woman. And this is because, as you know, the heteropatriarchal situation that we suffer in Mexico and we suffer in a lot of countries. And in addition, there is another problem, as you said, Angel, that is they lost their family. Why they lost their family? Because if you are a mother, when your children are, I don't know, in Mexico, maybe 6 years old. In Spain, I think that is 3 years old. But when your kid is 3 or 4 or 5 years old, he or she has to move away of prison. So the mother is going to lose his son or daughters. But in addition, they are going to lose their father and mother. Why? Because of the stigma, the social stigma. If you are a man in Mexico and you commit a crime, there isn't any problem. You are more bigger because you have the force to make a crime. But if you are a woman, you are broken the social rules, and that makes that in a lot of occasions your mother and your father don't want to visit you in prison. So the situation is very complicated, and this makes that Boecio and the government of passion could be very useful for women in prison. More or less is a summary of you said. So at the end, we have Edson Renato Nardi from Brazil, from Sao Paulo, from Ribeirão Preto, and he was working with a team of several people. It's important to say that despite here we are just men in Boecio project, we are not, all of us are not men, okay? For example, in Brazil, there are working with Edson, Cristina, and another people. For example, here in Brazil, Cristina and other people are working with him, and in Mexico, for example, Cristal is going to work with Marcos Alonso, and here we have a proposal in Madrid, and it is open, obviously, to men and women, and in Colombia, there is a lot of women in Boecio project, even though now we are just men, but anyway, it's the female and men project. So thank you very much, Edson, to be with us, and you have more or less 10 minutes in order we have some time to make some question, and here I can see a question from Pia. Thank you very much, and if you want to write down more questions in English, Spanish, or Portuguese, you can do it while Edson is talking.
Okay. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here again without beard. While I was hearing Angel's presentation, I remembered the traditional Russian compliment, then Zdravstvuyte for everybody. I'm very happy to be here again. Well, initially, I would like to congratulate my fellow researchers and in particular Barrientos for the opportunity once again to participate in this event and to be able to contribute in some way to the advancement of philosophy and more specifically the philosophical practice represented through the Boecio project. In this brief presentation, I try to deal with the particularities that involve the attempt of the institution where I work to take higher education in prison environments, the adaptations of process and procedures that we had to carry out, and the current challenges of teaching philosophy in these environments. Initially, I should contextualize my role and the institution where I work. I coordinate the philosophy course at Centro Universitário Claretiano, a Catholic confessional institution that originated in Spain and established itself in Brazil at the beginning of the 20th century. During this period, we started initially offering training in basic education. In the 70s of the last century, we started to offer higher education, and in mid-2005, we were authorized to offer online higher education training throughout Brazil. We currently have around 20,000 students enrolled in our institution, and we have training centers in Europe, the Americas, and Japan. As for our prison system, Brazil now ranks third among the countries that most incarcerate in the world, behind only the United States and China. According to data released by the Ministry of Justice, this day there are 206,000 prisoners in the country, which represents an increase of 26% compared to the previous survey. Of the total number of prisoners, 40% are provisional, and drug trafficking is the crime that most imprisons. 28% of the prisoners, or 103,000 people, were convicted of involvement in trafficking. The states that concentrate the largest prison population is São Paulo, with 104,000 inmates. From the beginning, given our educational mission, we considered the possibility of offering our undergraduate course to individuals who are deprived of liberty due to a crime committed. Our first partnership was with a penitentiary located in the interior of the state of São Paulo. Called one of Serra Azul, this prison unit is located in the municipality of Serra Azul, in the interior of the state of São Paulo. It is a cross prison unit inaugurated on December 2002, which has an estimated capacity of 853 inmates, and which in July 2021 currently has 1,491 inmates. It's a maximum secure penitentiary that prisoners who have committed all type of crimes, except for sexual crimes, crimes where the offender is imprisoned, institutions aiming only at these types of crimes. In the beginning, our first challenge was structural. We had to provide equipment that would allow the detainees who wanted to graduate to have access to computers and the internet. Once the first stage had been completed, the following challenges were presented to us. The detainees could not have contact with the other students who are enrolled in the course and could not have access to other virtual environments. That is, they could only have access to our classroom, virtual training class. These demands, made in the name of security and to prevent inmates from creating criminal media or with a criminal association that is present in and outside prisons, brought numerous challenges. Many of the educational activities that we proposed are based on the debate of ideas through specific themes that we previously proposed and that they are carried out in the discussion forums could no longer be carried out. Videos and texts that should be accessed externally had to be inserted within the virtual training environment. As for the videos, as some of them were larger than the size supported by our system, they had to be partitioned so they could be attached to the repository for students' access. In general, even though these adaptations haven't taken place, there have undoubtedly been some qualitative losses in the training process of these students, because interviews and investigations that should be carried out for a specific audience outside the prison environment, previously defined in our French teaching, could not be made or had undergone modifications. As an example, I cite a prisoner who was a student of ours in the philosophy graduation course and who is imprisoned in a prison in Curitiba, in the state of Paraná. Some of the forums provide for debate with classmates, and as he was isolated in a specific virtual classroom for him, this procedure could not be performed. Furthermore, specifically in the course we offer in the philosophy area, brainstorm, argumentation, and counter-argument are naturally required and necessary elements for philosophical learning and have been largely impeded by these requirements. Due to the above, we have exercised the Stoic practice of separating the things that we cannot change, as they have a external cause to us, and on the other hand, we have tried to do everything possible so that the inmates who enter our institution can have the best possible training in this existing context. As occasionally, I act as a teacher of these students who are detained. I must say that, in light of this contact, despite all these difficulties and problems pointed out, the possibility that they may have access to education, the expansion of horizons and possibilities has transformed lives, inspired existential change, and given a new lease of life where there was only hopelessness, conformism, and ostracism until then. In this regard, I would like to present three examples. The first of them refers to the detained already mentioned above, and who is in the prison Curitiba. His article, produced at the end of the studies, was chosen to be present at a multi-institutional event on the teaching of philosophy, and in this sense, his text makes a critical analysis of Brazilian prison systems, point out some of their irregularities, and on the other hand, the halo of hope provided through his contact with education through the graduation he took. The other two examples occurred when I was applying Boécio's project. One of the detainees, who was a student of my applied philosophy workshops, stood out among the others, and we included him as an applicator of the workshops in the second stage of the project. When he was transferred to a semi-open prison unit, his personal example and the examples he presented to his colleagues stood out, leading the directors responsible for the educational program in the prison to seek to know what the project was about and to express interest in the even if implanted in that prison unit. Finally, the last example I would like to present refers to an inmate who discovered in literature books, in Charles Bukowski's poetry, and in philosophy, a way of dealing with the difficulties of being imprisoned. Step by step, he was writing a police drama in his notebooks, and on one of the occasions, he presented his texts to us, and this act ended up culminating in its publication. To end this speech, I would like to mention the challenges we have to face, which are not few. I live in a country whose discourse of the state as an avenging agent of society permeates all sectors of society. The discourse that human rights can only be applied to humans who have not committed crimes is endorsed by populist politicians and by sectors of the media. And in this condition, some of my students who questioned the system were transferred to pavilions where certain rights, such as access to education, were restricted. A collection of philosophy books that I obtained for this student was prevented from being delivered. When contacting sectors of the press to publicize the book that the student I mentioned just now, the first question they asked was, what crime was committed before they considered the possibility of publication. These and many other examples that we have collected over time show that the challenges are still very great. But to paraphrase Sun Tzu in this book, The Art of War, The great battles are beginning to be won with the first step, and in that sense, we are starting to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edson. And as you said, in a lot of occasions, what we get, what people get and or achieve in Boetio is meaning, is something to do in their life. There is a lot of question in the chat. Jamini have raised her hand, but first of all, I am going to try to read some of the comments and questions in order we can answer them. First of all, Pia Huni said that thank you for your important panel. I like to share a couple of names you might already know. Horst Gronke from Germany is a pioneer to make Socratic dialogue in jails. His work documented by German television a few years ago. Also in Norway, Anders Holt has worked with female prisoners in many years. If you want to say something, or thank you very much, Pia. Indeed, we have been working to know who is working in prison, and Gronke and Gronke and Anders Holt have an interesting article that you can read from 2003, I think so. And they were based in Peter Garrett, that is another people who work in prisons. And I think that their work is very important in Socratic dialogue. And indeed, there are several people who are working in prison now. For example, I talk about Maria Tillmans in USA, but for example, Gregory Sander, or for example, Sifris, that is it was a student, a PhD candidate in UK, and she was working in UK. And there are several people working in prisons, but I have to say that we have to distinguish between giving lectures, between lecturing in prison and making workshops. There are several universities that are giving lectures, and it is very good, but this is not what we are doing. We are not giving a lecture on Aristotle or on Plato or the like. We are trying to develop philosophical skills. We are trying to working out. Boetio is trying to working out with people, and this is very important. And Gronke and Anders Holt did it in a very good way on the point of Socratic dialogue. But we have a couple of questions, and I am going to move to the to my colleagues. Andrea Almeida said, "Hi Pepe, great initiative. I have a couple of questions. First of all, are the participant inmates voluntary, or is it compulsory that they participate? And second one, what is the average group size of the participant?" Angel Alonso have answered, but if you want to say something, Edson or Raul, in addition to what Angel have right now.
In my case, in the Canary Islands, I used to go 2 or 1 weeks before the start Boetio training. I tried to sell the training to all the people there, to all the women. They decide who want to be part of Boetio. So we've got a group of 15 women there. So that's the question.
Edson, is it voluntary in Brazil? Is it compulsory?
No, it's voluntary here too.
Normally in some groups it's voluntary and compulsory. I mean, in some occasion you are going to say inmates and detainees that they have several courses or workshops that they have to do. I mean, they have to do imagine 3 workshops per week, but they can choose those 3 workshops between 15 or 20 workshops. So the workshops are not voluntary because inmates have to register in 3 workshops, but it is not compulsory that they do the philosophical workshops. So they are voluntary and compulsory. So both of them in general in prisons. Anyway, in some situation, there aren't a lot of possibilities in prison. So this is normally the situation. And concerning the second question, what is the average group size? In Boecio, the average group size is between 15 and 20. This is the average group size. And in some occasion, it could be difficult, as Raul said, to get those people. Why? To get the people is not so complicated. The problem is that you have 15 people from the beginning to the end of the process. Why? Because we are working for 7 months. And during 7 months in a prison, there are a lot of situations. Some inmates that move to another prison, some inmates that have a health situation or they died. So, but normally we try to make groups of 20 people in Boecio in order that at the end we have at least 15, 14, 15 people in Boecio in general. I don't know if you want to add something, Angel? No? Or we move to another question, Cecilia. She said, I have a question. Do the exercises to rule over passions have to always start from personal experience, or do you use case studies or imaginary situation as examples if the prisoners don't want to get involved personally? Are the exercise related to the personal experience, or are they imaginary situation?
Well, at the beginning, it's very complicated to work with their own emotions, because there are not any confidence between the group and the facilitator. At the beginning, I can't say that no, but when the sessions are running, so sometimes they get their emotions get involved and they express what they feel, but not at the beginning. So during the Boecio training, it is for me could be possible to work with their emotion, their experience, and it's always a resource. So our own experience. So you cannot get apart from your emotions. So, but it is different when you have to express or expose your own life. No, that's a different. But you are working with your emotions. But at the beginning, you don't express them. So,
Edson, Angel.
Yes. Thank you for the question, Cecilia. In the sessions I participated, we used the personal experience, case studies, imaginary situations, and in particular, in the second stage of the project, we use the prisoners themselves. And we make this choice because they have a lot of examples that the other detainees live in the ordinary world where they are. Then I think this was a great option. Then we use all these kinds of strategies to apply the classroom lessons.
Thank you, Edson. Angel?
In Mexico, I try to speak in third person because when the women speak about your experience, they maybe have problems. And for these reasons, I try to speak about the paragraphs of the text of the philosophers.
That's
Yes.
yes.
in Brazil was different, Cecilia. The prisoners want that we could hear them. They appreciate to be involved personally with the examples and the situations, because in this moment they could be see as a human. Yeah, and I think that this is a great problem. Normally, they are only a number. They are not a person who have ideas, who have experience, who have emotions. Then, here in Brazil, we noted that they appreciate to be involved personally.
In some prison, it is true, as Angel said, that if you make a very personal question and the inmates, female or male, make a personal answer, it could be very risky. This is the reason, because they are going to lie, and this is not good for the exercise. So in some occasion, as Angel Alonso said, we said, okay, imagine this situation, and imagine that you're not going to answer, but imagine what someone that you know answered to this question. So it is a way that they answer, but they are not answer. I mean, they are answer personally, but they say, this is not my answer, this is not my situation, but normally it's their situation. So it is a way to protect themselves. So in some occasion, in some exercise, we say, okay, let's do this exercise, but imagine that you are not going to answer. Imagine that the person who has to answer is a friend of you, a colleague of you, or the like. And as I said, this is a way of protect themselves in some occasion. Anyway, the point is to create a personal relation with inmates, because they are people. I remember a video, an interview that Edson make with Boecio Project with some detainees, and some of them said the most important thing here is that in the session we were people, and normally people from outside think that we are something like monsters, and you know what means a monster. A monster is less than nothing, because if you are nothing, you are nothing, but if you are monster, you are a bad thing. And normally we have to think who is in prison. The person who is in prison is someone who commit a crime, but that crime is determined by the government. So, for example, if the government said that if you don't follow the rules, the norms for COVID-19, you are going to go to a prison, you can go to a prison. And that's the point. Here in Spain, there are some people, not now because we have some low problems, but last year, some people were going to prison because they break the rule of COVID-19, because they move away of their house for some hours in several times. No, so that's the point. In some occasions, you are going to go to prison because you are not following up the rules, and in occasion the rule is not justice. So that's more or less the point. There is a question by Yamini. She raised her hand. Yamini Bhutani, if you want to.
Yes.
Thank you.
So my question is to Professor Branton, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Brantos, and Raul also. Like, he said that the life of women and prisoners is very intense, and you also talked about that sometimes to protect themselves they lie. So my question is, most of these women and prisoners have psychological disorders. And in philosophical practice, there is a division that some of the practitioners say that we are not going to deal with psychological problems, and some say that they want to collaborate with them, psychology and philosophy. So when it comes to the practice in prisons, what is your approach? Because I believe most of them are having some kind of problems, and not small level of problem, intense personality disorders or psychological problems. So how do you deal with it?
How do you want to start?
Yeah, as you said, they've got many of them. They've got very several mental disorders or kind of that. But first of all, we are not allowed to work with this in Boesio. So even if you are a professional or psychologist, but in this program, we are not allowed to. Some parts or some concepts or some sessions talk about or work about emotions, but in a stoic way. They are related to any other areas as psychology, but by the way of philosophy. But specifically, if when you have when the woman have a psychological problem, first of all, we are not allowed to work with. But in a normal day, in a normal session, we work with emotions, thoughts, and probably it is helpful. But it is not our job in Boesio.
So the women you work with do not have any kind of psychological problems?
Maybe, I don't know if I understand you very well. You say that they've got psychological problem. You say that? Yeah, probably a lot of. Probably a lot of. That's why they are in prison. I said they've got an intense life and in a short period of time, so your head is blow up maybe. Yeah, they've got a lot. Yeah, but we are not allowed to work with. All right.
Yamini, I'm going to start my answer by asking you a question, or all of you. How many psychologists do you think that are in a prison with 1,000 inmates in Spain? How many? 1,000 inmates. How many psychologists do you think we have in a prison with 1,000? What do you think?
I have no idea about Spain. I think there should be 700, 800.
700?
Possible.
700
500.
700 psychologists with 1,000. No, less.
No.
Less than 700 psychologists. What do you think? How many psychologists we have in a prison with 1,000? Less than 700. More? Federico? How many psychologists?
I don't know, perhaps 10.
10?
Yes.
Less. Maria Tillmans, she's saying 2. No, 5. But the problem is from 5 psychologists from 1,000 prisoners, okay? One is on holiday. Another one have personal problems with health. Another one is with COVID. The other one is working with some documents. So, as Maria said, we have one psychology for all the people. The doctor is the same. As Angel said to me, in some occasion, when you go to the doctor in the prison, the doctor is going to say to you, okay, you are here in the doctor, and you can say me one problem, one health problem in your life. And the prisoner can say, I have three illness, and I want to talk about 3 illness. and the doctor is going to say, no, I don't have time, just one illness, you have 5 minutes for it. So the first problem, what I want to say, is that in a lot of prison, and mainly in Latin American prison, there aren't any psychologists. So this is first problem. Second, it is true in theory that there isn't anyone with mental illness in prison. Why? Because in theory, they have to go to a hospital. If you have any problem and you have committed a crime, you have to go to a mental illness residence and not to the prison. But this is not true. The prison, they have a lot of people with mental illness. So it is true, as you said, that we are not going to work with people with mental illness. It is true, but the real thing is that in our workshops we have people with mental illness, and we have worked with it. What is the problem? That we know the situation. We say to the government, to the director of the prison, here you have a problem with these people. I remember a person that have a colleague of mine said that he has an inmate that he went to all the session with a sandwich, and he ate his sandwich in the sessions. And my colleague said to the director, you have a problem with this person, because when this person takes the sandwich on the roof, you are going to have a big problem here, because he has a mental illness. And the problem, as you know, Jamini, is that one day he put the sandwich on the roof, and there was a problem. But there wasn't a problem in philosophy. Normally, in Spain, inmates are very controlled, so we don't used to have problem with mental illness. So we are not working with his mental illness. Anyway, in some occasions, philosophy could help those people not to cure their mental illness, but to control their crisis. And there was a doctor in 200 years ago that used Epictetus to work with mental illness in a hospital. And he discovered that Epictetus doesn't heal, doesn't cure their patients, but the crises were less and less after they reading Epictetus. So we are not working to cure, to destroy that mental illness. Anyway, philosophy in some sense can make more calm a person, and that could be important. But the problem is that in some occasion we have some people with mental problems.